And he's like to the bloke next to him, he's like, "Oi, put the 40 on." Then the bloke puts the 40 on, and then they're like, "Oi, mate, put the 80 on." And then they put the 80 on. So we're playing 5, 5, 10, 20, 40, 80, which is by far the biggest game I've ever played on this vlog. G'day poker people, welcome back to the vlog. The following is from my Sunday night up in Adelaide. Originally I was going to play at the Royal Poker Club again, but I had dinner with a mate and we decided to actually go to the Stack Social Club instead, which is another poker room in the north of Adelaide. But it's not just a poker room, there's also a bar there and it's a space where they do social functions as well. So it's a really cool venue and I definitely wanted to check it out whilst I was in Adelaide. There is one cash game running and it is a 5-5-10. But as the night goes along, the game keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You'll see what I mean, but it is a massive game I end up playing unsuspectingly on this Sunday night. So without any further ado, let's get in the first hand. I initially bought into the game for 1,500. Let's see if I can run it up. So first hand to kick this thing off, we are playing 5-5-10 and a unknown hijack goes ahead and open limps. Then I'm in the big blind with 9-8 of clubs. I decide to overlimp here. Think there might be some merit to squeezing, but being that I don't know the opponent and live players, typically limp call. I don't really want to push it with a middling strength hand like 9-8 suited, so I just call and then the straddle checks. So we're three ways to a flop of Jack 4 deuce rainbow with one club. I check it over to the limpers and then they check as well. So we get a free turn, which is the 9 of spades, giving us a pair, which is pretty nice. I go ahead and check it over though, just because I'm out of position to two opponents. I think it might be better off me checking and potentially inducing bluffs from them. So I go ahead and check it over. Then the straddle does bet 25. Then the hijack actually calls the 25, so the action's back on me, and pretty interesting decision whether we want to call or fold here. I do think there is some chance that we're ahead with our pair of nines here, but the fact we do lose to any jack and both the opponents do have a few jacks in their range is a bit concerning. This could go either way, but in this instance, I throw in the call. So we're still three ways to a river, which is the 8 of spades. So we do make two pair, which is pretty nice. And now I said on the turn that I was pretty concerned that either of the opponents could have a jack. Now I kind of hope they have a jack, and I actually think this is a good spot to lead, to try and get value from those hands, just because they're going to check back their weaker jacks pretty often, and even if they do bet them, they're probably not calling a check raise anyway. So I go ahead and lead out 75, then the straddle calls pretty quickly, the hijack folds, I end up showing my hand, and then the opponent shows jack deuce offsuit. So they flop two pair, and they're going to get us on this one. Not a great way to start this session. Next up, under the gun opens it for 35, then I'm in the straddle with queen 10 of diamonds and I throw in the call. So we're heads up to a flop of king queen 10, rainbow with one diamond, so pretty good flop for us. I go ahead and check it over to the pre-flop aggressor though. Then they go ahead and c-bet 40. Now, pretty interesting whether we want to check raise or just call here. The main reason I would like check raising is because, well, the two main reasons. One is we have a really strong hand and the other is we're out of position. But I do think there is some concern that if I check raise bottom two pair on this board, it might be a bit of an overplay. The opponent's going to know I have a lot of jack 9 and ace jack in my range, and I could even see them potentially hero folding a hand as strong as, king jack or ace king even. So I just decide to call. So we're still heads up to a turn, which is the 5 of spades, putting out backdoor spades. I go ahead and check it over to the villain, which is another problem when you don't check raise on the flop. You sort of let the opponent have the betting lead. But whatever the case, I checked it over to them and then they checked back pretty quickly. So it heads up to a river. It's a beautiful one. It's the queen of spades. Let's go. We made a full house. Not that I think we needed to anyway, but now I think we have a very clear decision to lead out with a bet here. I think it's very likely my opponent has a showdown-driven range when they do check back on this turn. I think even ace king and king jack are going to check back on the turn a lot, just because the board is pretty scary for those hands. So I want to bet big here to maximize value against those hands. So I go ahead and bet 160, and then the opponent calls very quickly. I show my hand and they end up mucking. They call very quick, and I think it's probably because I had a strong king, and I'm very happy to maximize value against that hand. Next hand, a tight aggressive cutoff opens it to 30. Then I'm on the button with queen 10 suited yet again, this time queen 10 of spades. I go ahead and 3-bet it to 90. And then a straddle actually cold calls my 3-bet and the cutoff calls as well. So we're three ways to a flop of 10-7-6 rainbow with one spade. The action checks to me, and pretty interesting whether I want to see bet on this board or not. I definitely want some stronger hands like top pair in my check back range to have easy call downs in the future, but I do think it makes some sense to play a bit of pot control as well. I think the straddle who cold call my 3-bet is going to have a lot of hands like jacks and queens in their range, but there is merit to betting and denying equity and getting value from pocket nines or pocket eights. They'll probably fold on later streets. Let me know what you would do in the comments. I checked it back in this instance term, which is the king of spades. Pretty interesting turn because we do have a flush draw, but we lose to any king now, and I think the straddle has a lot of ace king in their range, so it is a bit of a concern. But the straddle goes ahead and checks it over to the cutoff, who bets 175. Now that the action's on me, being that we're in position, we have a bit of showdown value with our pair and a draw to a flush, as well as two pairs and trips. I think we have a pretty easy decision to just call here. So I chuck it in, and then the straddle actually calls as well. So we're still three ways to a river, which is the jack of hearts. Not the river we were looking for. The straddle checks it over the cutoff, and then the cutoff is in the tank, probably a good 2 minutes or so. He's really, really deep in the tank. And then eventually he goes ahead and bets 500. Whilst the opponent was tanking, I did briefly consider raising here as a bluff. We do block pocket tens, as well as having a queen blocks queen nine and ace queen, which is great as well, of course. Having said that, though, I think folding probably is the better option. I really do think the cutoff's going to have a lot of two pair plus, and we still have to worry about the straddle waking up with an ace king or two pair set themselves. So I really do want to play it a bit cautious and actually decide to fold the queen 10 here, and then the straddle folds really quickly as well. Next hand, an unknown hijack open limps, and then I'm in the big blind with queen 10 suited yet again. 3 hands in a row. This must be my lucky hand. I go ahead and raise it up to 60 this time, and then the hijack calls. So it heads up to a flop of king 10-3 rainbow with one diamond. I go ahead and check it over the hijack, basically just trying to induce bets from worse hands. Then they go ahead and bet 75, and I think we have a pretty clear call with middle pair here. So we get to see the turn. It's a beautiful one. It's the queen of spades. Let's go. We do make two pair. I still go ahead and check it over to the opponent. I think if they do have hands like king queen or king jack that limp called, they're probably just going to keep betting. But I also really want to get value from the bluffs they're going to have in their range in this spot, particularly backdoor spades. Then they do go ahead and bet again. They go ahead and make it 125. Now, the action's on me, and I actually think this is a really good spot to check raise. We don't really lose to that much. They could have ace-jack or jack-9, I suppose, but if they can have those hands, they can also have king-queen and king-jack, and maybe even a worse two-pair, like king-3 suited or something, all of which we can get value from. So I really do think check raising is the best play here. I decided to just call though. I think this is a bit too cautious, and I'm probably missing value from worse hands that might check back on the river. So a bit of a mistake on my part, but I do decide to just call. Then we get to see a river, and it's an absolute banger. 10 of hearts, let's go. We make a full house on the river. Now we really do hope the opponent has ace jack. I still go ahead and check it over to them. Just want to keep all their bluffs firing at it. And then if they do have, ace jack or jack 9, they're probably going to have to call a check raise depending on what they size on the river. So I go ahead and check it over to them. Then they go ahead and bet 425. I only had 840 in my stack at the start of the river, so pretty easy. Check raise all in for value. Let's go. Let's hope they have ace jack. I rip it all in, and then the opponent snap calls. I show my queen 10, and then they show king 10. Oh, absolute sick cooler in this massive pot. They do have a better full house, and not much I can do there. Next hand, the straddle is not on for whatever reason, and I'm in the hijack with ace king of hearts. I go ahead and raise it up to 15. They get no less than 4 different callers. So we're 5 ways to a flop of king 10-4 rainbow with one heart. When the action checks to me, I think betting into 4 people is just asking for trouble. So I just check it here, and then the cutoff and button check as well. So we're still 5 ways to a turn, which is the 6 of spades, putting out backdoor spades. The action checks me yet again, and now I kind of do want to start betting for value. Really want to charge flush draws and get as much value from a worse king as I possibly can. So I go ahead and bet 40 now. Then the action folds round to a small blind, who goes ahead and check raises it to 100. The action folds back to me, and I think we have a pretty clear call here. Somewhat worried that the opponent could have 2 pair, they could have turned 2 pair, they could have slow played a flops 2 pair on the turn yet again, looking to check raise. But considering we're getting a really good price here, and we do have a hand as strong as top pair, I think we can't go anywhere just yet, so I throw in the call. So we're still heads up to a river, which is the eight of spades, completing the backdoor flush. Then the opponent goes ahead and bets 150, getting 2.8 to 1 on a call. I really don't think we're good here, 26% of the time or more, just because the backdoor flush did get in, and I'm still concerned about all those flops and turn two pairs that we lose to. So I go ahead and lay my hand down there. Next hand, we have no straddle on yet again, and the under the gun player goes ahead and raises it up to 20. Then the hijack calls, and I'm in the big blind with 10-7 of diamonds, and I just like to call here. Pretty close decision, but I think it's fine. So I throw it in, and then we're three ways to a flop. Flop's a pretty good one. It is 10-10-7 with two hearts. I'll take it, man. I'll take a flop full house for sure. I go ahead and check it over to the pre-flop aggressor still. They go ahead and bet 25. The hijack folds really quickly. Then I decide to just call here. I think it's a good spot to slow play on the flop. If my opponent's bluffing with like queen jack suited or something, I really want him to keep barreling or maybe catch up a bit on the turn with a pair or something. So I just call, and then we heads up to the turn, which is the four of spades. I go ahead and check it over to the villain again. Really hope they continue betting off their overpairs. Then they do go ahead and bet 75. Now it's a pretty interesting decision whether we want to go ahead and check raise or just call again. The merits to check raising are to basically build the pot when my opponent has an overpair or stronger. But I really do think this opponent in particular, when they're the type of opponent that, refuses to straddle in a 5-5-10 game, they are going to play more conservative. And I really do think this opponent will start to fold some of their overpairs in this spot. And then they only continue with 10x plus hands, which we block really heavily. So I think because of that, it's a good spot to just call, which is what I do. I throw it in, and then we're heads up to the river, which is the king of diamonds. Now, originally when I called on the turn, my plan was to lead the river, but I do think the king of diamonds is going to be a bit of a scare card if my opponent has jacks or queens. If they do have a bluff or 10x, I really think they're going to keep betting anyway, and then I can look to mix in a bit of a check raise. So I do check it over to them, and they pretty much snap check back. I show my full house, and then the opponent marks. They later told me that they have pocket jacks, so not sure if they would have called a river lead or not here. Next hand, the straddle's finally back on, and under the gun and the hijack go ahead and open limp, and then I'm on the button with ace-9 of hearts, and I decide to over limp as well. Some merit to raising, but I think calling and playing a pot in position is fine with a hand as strong as ace-9 suited, and it's actually a decent hand to limp call with as well. So I go ahead and over limp, and then so does the small blind, and the action's on the big blind, who goes ahead and raises it up to 55, and then literally everyone, including the straddle, but not the hijack, throws in the call. So we are 5 different ways to a flop of queen 7-4 with 2 spades. It's a pretty big whiff for us, so when the action checks to my button, I check it back. Then we get to say a turn, which is the ace of spades, so we do make top pair. And the action checks to the pre-flop aggressor, who goes ahead and bets 225. The action falls back to me, and honestly, I think the chances that the big blind has ace queen or ace king, or maybe even stronger hand like a set or something, is pretty likely, and they're playing kind of face up in all honesty. So because of that, I don't really feel the need to defend with top pair when there's so many runners. So I end up folding my hand. So does the small blind, and then the big blind was actually kind enough to show the table ace king. So we haven't been running that hot this session, so happy to pull in a small win like this, making a good fold. Next hand, a loose passive. Low jack goes ahead and open limps, and then a tight aggressive button raises it up to 30. Then I'm in the big blind with pocket tens, and I 3-bet it to 125. And then the limper actually calls the 3-bet, and the original raiser folds to the 3-bet. So we're heads up with the low jack to a flop of queen 10-9 with 2 diamonds. Let's go. We hit middle set. Definitely going to go ahead and c-bet on this board, particularly against a loose passive opponent who I think is going to call pretty wide. So I go ahead and make it 150, and then they do throw in the call. So we're still heads up to a turn, which is the 5 of diamonds. Definitely not the best turn card in the world. It does put in the front door diamonds, and I honestly think the limp is going to be limp calling with a lot of any 2 suited type hands. Like even if they had jack 3 of diamonds here, I wouldn't be totally shocked. So I go ahead and check it over to them, playing a bit of pot control, and then they do check back really quickly. So we get to see a river, which is the king of diamonds. Awful river. We lose to any diamond in the deck now, so absolutely nothing to do but check it over to the opponent. And then they check back really quickly, so feeling pretty happy about that. I show my pocket tens, and then the opponent flashes the queen of hearts before mucking their hand. So absolutely stoked that we pulled this hand in despite a bad run out. Kind of tells that there was a bad run out though, because I think the opponent definitely would have called another bet with top pair. Next hand, I'm under the gun with pocket queens. I go ahead and raise it up to 25. Then the action's round to the hijack, who min click 3-bets me to 50. Then a tight aggressive cutoff throws in a 4-bet. They go ahead and make a 125. So the action's back on me here, and usually I think this would be a pretty interesting decision whether we wanted to 5-bet call or even fold. But I think in this specific dynamic, 5-betting is the clear play. The hijack did min click 3-bet me, and they've actually been min click 3-betting pretty much every hand for the past 5 minutes or so. So I don't think it's indicative of strength at all. And I think the cutoff is savvy enough to realize that. And they're going to be 4-betting like much, much wider than a typical 5-bet will be early position versus hijack versus cutoff. So I think we need to raise it up. I go ahead and 5-bet it to 250, and in all honesty, usually when I 5-bet, I do go with the 2x sizing, but in this specific dynamic, I think betting something closer to 300 or maybe even larger probably would be better sizing. Regardless though, I made it 250, and then both the hijack and the cutoff call. So we're still 3 ways to a flop of ace king 3 with 2 clubs. So pretty interesting. Usually when I'm a 4-better or a 5-better, I'm going to have a range bet on an ace king 3 board just because I have all of the super strong hands on this board, and I do think both the other players probably have some combinations of ace king, but I think given the dynamics, the cutoff is very likely to 6-bet aces or kings. Maybe they flat with kings sometimes, but yeah, I just think it's a good spot to have a range bet. If I was going to work in a checking range, pocket queens would absolutely be in that range, but I think range betting is probably just more efficient in this spot. So I go ahead and bet 250, then the hijack folds really quickly and the cutoff calls. So we're heads up with the cutoff to a turn, which is the 10 of hearts. I have about 1k left in my stack, and I think given that that's the SPR, I think this is a slam dunk all in as a bluff. I think I'm going to have so many combinations of ace king plus here, then I probably am going to get a lot of folds when I bet. Remember how loose the dynamics work pre-flop. If the cutoff did 4-bet a hand like ace jack suited or ace 10 suited, like it's pretty likely that they would call the 5-bet, being that I gave them such a good price, and the hijack overcalled my 5-bet. And I think those hands are going to be in an absolute nightmare spot if I rip it all in. And I'm definitely going to get folds from those hands at least occasionally, in which case I'm going to have to put some hands in my bluffing range. And I think pocket queens is the slam dunk one to put in there, just put maximum pressure on an ace X hand. I decided to check it over to the opponent. I really hate this decision. I think I'm losing a bunch of EV when my opponent would fold a single ace X hand. Sure, I save money in the specific instance when they do have ace king or better, but I really do think, given the loose dynamics of the pre-flop action, it's very, very likely that they are going to have some ace X hands, which are not going to be able to call the all-in. Whatever the case though, I made what I honestly think is a pretty epic mistake and check it over to them, and then they check back really quickly. So the river is the 9 of hearts, and given that I didn't go all in on the turn, I think I have to just check it at this point. I think my opponent will be much, much more likely to call off with ace queen and ace jack on this straight than they were on the previous straight, just because my turn check does look a bit weak. And we do have some showdown value with pocket queens. I check it over to them. They do check back really quickly. I show my queens, and then they show ace queen of spades. So not sure if they would have called a turn all in or not, but really kicking myself for not going for it in that spot. So at this point of the session, I think it's probably like 2 a.m. And this is where the game starts to get really, really crazy. So people were straddling and double straddling, and there was one player in particular at the game who was really trying to push that action. So we're playing 5-5-10, and then he goes ahead and straddles to 20. And he's like to the bloke next to him, he's like, "Oi, put the 40 on." Then the bloke puts the 40 on, and then they're like, "Oi, mate, put the 80 on," and then they put the 80 on. So we're playing 5-5-10-20-40-80, which is by far the biggest game I've ever played on this vlog. I started the hand with about 1.2k, aka 15 big blinds at this point, and I'm on the button with ace jack offsuit, and there is absolutely nothing to do here but go all in. This is a massive game and crazy, crazy high variance. And I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not really rich enough to afford to play this game, but when I'm in this spot, I'm not going to give up the EV of shoving 15 big blinds all in with ace jack offsuit on the button. I rip it all in for 1.2k, then the action folds round to the original player who's driving the action and put the 20 on, and they rejam for about 4k. Everyone else folds, I show my ace jack, and then they show ace king offsuit. Pretty brutal hand to be against, but we still do have outs, and we've got the live run out on the vlog. Really just trying to will a jack into existence at this point. No good on the queen high flop. A few runner straight outs. Maybe we can hit some gut shot on the turn. Seven hearts, no good for us. Gonna need to hit that jack. There's the queen of clubs on the river. GG, the opponent's going to get us in this over 2.5k pot, which funnily enough is actually only slightly over 30 big blinds. So I got one final hand before I wrap this thing up, and this hand is a 5, 5, 10, 20, 40. This has sort of started to become commonplace in the past hour or so of the game. So yeah, I'm playing like really, really big stakes right now. So I'm in the first straddle with King 2 of Hearts. I go ahead and open raise it to a 150. Not sure if, with two straddles still left to act, if a suited king is strong enough to open in this spot, but pretty sure it's a close decision either way. I go ahead and make it 150, and then only the second straddle calls, who was the same player driving the action this whole time. So we're heads up to a flop of 9-6-4 with two hearts. So pretty good flop for us. We do make a flush draw. Interesting whether we want to c-bet or not. The reasons I would like c-betting are we do have a lot of equity with our flush draw, but not a lot of showdown value with king high. Maybe we can fold out ace x with a bet, but also, this board's pretty good for my opponent's range. I think they're going to have a lot of two pairs and a lot of draws that are going to call, and then we're inflating the pot out of position, which isn't great either. I go ahead and make it 180, and then the opponent calls. So we're heads up to a turn, which is the 10 of diamonds. Not a great turn for us. The obvious 8-7 draw gets in, and it's not a heart, which also sucks for us. So I just go ahead and check it over to the opponent. Then they go ahead and bet 350, so a bit less than half the size of the pot. Look, we're not getting direct odds to draw to our flush draw, but I really think against this opponent in particular, if they do have a hand that's two pair plus, I don't think there's any way they don't put more money in on the river. So I definitely think there are at least some implied odds for us to hit our flush on the river. So I do decide to throw in the call here. And then we get to see the river, which is the 7 of spades. So absolute massive whiff for us. I go ahead and check it over to the opponent. Then they go ahead and bet 300. So despite these phenomenal pot odds, absolutely no way I'm paying them off with king high. I end up folding my hand, and the opponent was actually kind enough to show us that they did have a7 of diamonds. So very happy we folded on the river. So there you have it. Those are the most interesting hands we played on this crazy Sunday night session of poker. But in terms of how I feel about my quality of play this session, I'm going to land on a B grade. I do really like a lot of the decisions I made this session, and I think my favorite thing I did this session is I didn't go on like crazy monkey tilt, even though I was running really bad in a really high stakes game for me. I felt like I was rational and still made some logical decisions after I lost all those big pots. Having said that though, not 100% rational decisions. I definitely did make some mistakes this session. I think the most egregious error is probably not bluffing with the pocket queens. That's just a slam dunk spot to go for a bluff where I do think my opponent's going to fold a lot, and I think I'm losing massive EV there, not going all in. Also, probably sitting and playing a game that regularly was like a 5, 5, 10, 20, 40. It is a very high stakes game, and I'm definitely not bankrolled for it. So when I do run bad in a game like that, it's really going to hit me worse than it would be if I ran bad in a normal, 5-10 game, for example. So I did sort of expose myself. The game was good though, and I wasn't playing 100% awful, so it did make sense to play as well. It's probably more a minor mistake, but a few mistakes in this hand history are definitely going to hold me back from that A grade this session, and that's why I landed on the B. Okay, so it's about 4 a.m. back in Adelaide, and I'm in the Airbnb at the moment, licking my wounds after a pretty brutal session. Ended up buying in for 7,000 and cashing out for 2,550, which makes this the single biggest loss I've ever had on the history of the vlog, and my biggest loss since May 2019 when I first played at the Commerce and I played 510. So absolutely brutal for me to have such a big loss, but as part of poker, you're going to run bad. Sometimes you're going to shot take and then run bad when you shot take. It's part of the game, and you can't let it get you discouraged from playing poker going forward. I'm going to put in another session tomorrow night, probably go back to the Royal Club instead, but really trying to get back on that horse, and not to chase losses or anything like that, but just because I'm a professional, I understand that big losses are part of the game, and I can't let it tilt me too much. So that's going to wrap up this vlog for today. Thank you for sticking all the way to the end. That really helps my channel's analytics, and I do appreciate it. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It'll make me feel much better after this loss. But for now, I'm out of here. Peace.